Hi there, it's Pete with your City Daily. Before lockdown, I was at the Cottam site and I work as a trainee GP over in Wales. Obviously, we're very much in pandemic mode, and last week, we have a part of the surgery which is for patients with fever and cough who might have coronavirus, and there's a special entrance and a separate room with different diagnostic gear. You go in, you can make sure you have all your kit on, and then we have the other rooms for people without those symptoms. And I was seeing a patient in the middle of a clinic last week, and as I was assessing them, I just took their temperature, and their temperature was above 38, and had that moment where I was like, oh no. Obviously I sorted out the patient. We kind of came up with a plan of how best to proceed, and then after he'd gone, I basically had to decontaminate the room, had to clean the room down, I had to go and get changed, and then I moved into a separate room, a different room, with a whole set of new gear, and all the while I've got patients waiting in the waiting room, and then when they come in they just think, what is this guy wearing? And then we had to leave that room for the rest of the day, so that we didn't use it. And it got me thinking about this kind of thing of us all getting into understanding quarantine and isolation and all the rules around that. Perhaps gives us a little window into what it was like under Levitical law, when you were unclean and you couldn't participate in society. And it's a bit like that, isn't it? When you're quarantined, you're stuck at home, and we all heard stories of people going a bit crazy with their family, all stuck at home. And I've recently been reading Mark, and at the beginning of Mark, Jesus meets a leper, and the leper says to him, if you're willing, you can make me clean. And it got me thinking about this idea of the isolation that we feel over the last 6 months, and of being separated from people, of being unable to touch people physically, to give your mum or your brother or your best mate a hug, or even to be in their company, to be present with them. And it got me thinking about that's been really hard for me, and I think lots of people have found that. But it made me think about these people like this guy who was meeting Jesus, who was separated from society since he'd been diagnosed with this skin condition, whether or not he'd been born with it. But he would have been essentially cast out from his society. He couldn't have attended the synagogue for Sabbath. He couldn't have attended the temple for feasts or anything like that, because he was unclean. And I think we're just getting a little window into what that might have felt like if you spent your whole life knowing that you couldn't participate, that you were on the fringe and were indefinitely so. You weren't coming back in. That was it. And this man, I think the way that he approaches Jesus shows us what it's like, that he felt that he was always on the outside. Because he said, if you're willing, you can make me clean. And he doesn't ask to be healed, he asks to be clean, because being clean gives you access into society. And I love Jesus' response, because he says, in the NIV it says that he's indignant. So he's indignant of being asked the question of whether or not he's willing. And it says that he was indignant, and then he says, I am willing, be clean. And then immediately the leprosy left him and he was cured. And it made me think that when we feel ostracized or on the fringe, or perhaps separated for whatever reason, that Jesus isn't bound by those things in our life that are separating us. He's not bound by human ideas of clean and not clean, or isolating or not isolating, or shielding or not shielding, or quarantine or not quarantine. Jesus is not bound by these things. Whereas a human, a Jewish person under that system, if they'd touched this man with leprosy, they would have become unclean, and they would have been separated, and they wouldn't have been able to participate in society. But Jesus touches the man, and instead of him being infected by this man's impurity, Jesus is so pure, he's so powerful, he's so holy, that his purity infects this man such that he is healed completely. And I just wanted to encourage you that today, if you feel that you're on the edge, if you feel unclean, if you feel that you weren't worthy of Jesus's attention or time or presence, that Jesus says that he is willing, and he's indignant that you would think that he wouldn't want to. He's so desperate to be with you that he is indignant by being asked the question. And when we think about this man's condition, it seemed beyond human power to be healed, and it was. But Jesus is powerful, and so Jesus is wanting to meet you in some way, shape or form right at this moment. And if you have any doubts over his power, then read this passage in Mark 1:40 to 45, and it demonstrates that he is powerful. His purity is powerful. And just like Isaiah, we can say that we are of unclean lips, but we meet the King and he makes us clean.